In this lesson, we're going to take a look at library types. Types are important when it comes to the asset-oriented approach because we rely on them tying everything together. So we've touched on UDTs and how UDTs are used to make sure our data sets are the same between assets and things like that. But what we really need to do now is create dependencies. So when we're looking at things like the asset management, so we have an analog asset manager here. We can tell TIA Portal that this analog asset manager is dependent upon these support blocks and also dependent upon the UDT that defines the analog asset. So we can see in here that I already have some UDTs defined as types. So in the previous lesson, we had a look at the library management console. What we're actually doing now, we don't really need to go into the back end. You can just drag and drop. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is ensure that TIA Portal understands that we cannot have an analog asset manager in our project without its supporting functions that it is dependent upon. And we can show this by dragging this across into our type library. And we get a little pop-up that says define the properties for the new type. I'm not going to make any of these, change any of these right now, but we can see a very important message here that there are dependent objects which will be stored as new types in the library. So if we click OK, what we should find is that everything that this is dependent upon is also brought in. So we can see that we have the analog asset manager, and it's also brought in the alarm manager, analog alarm manager, analog limit condition, and the analog scale. And they've all been versioned with the same version number that the analog asset manager had. Now, granted, having them just chucked in the same place isn't very nice. You can go in and create folders and stuff and add them in with the same file structure that you've got on this side. Unfortunately, what you can't do is drag a folder in. So if you've built everything on your project tree side, you've done all of your structuring on the project tree side, you have to redo it again in the project library, which is a bit of a oversight by Siemens there. It's very frustrating that you've got to do that, but unfortunately that is the only way that you can do it. So again, we've got some valves here as well, quarter turn valve and modulating valve. I don't actually have the block for modulating valve in here at the moment. But the quarter turn valve manager, we can go ahead and add that in as well. And for this one, this also says there are dependent objects which will be stored as new types in the library. But the only thing that it's actually brought in is the quarter turn valve manager, and that's because the UDT associated with it is actually already in the library, so it doesn't need to bring anything else in. Or it might have brought in that asset. I think it brought that in actually, asset operation mode manager. I think that came in with it. So types are essentially a way of defining your dependencies, and dependency in asset oriented programming is really, really important. It is basically the concept in a nutshell. The whole thing relies on dependency. So we will be making use of the project library more and more. It's a requirement anyway, because when we come to do faceplates later on, you'll see why we have to do it. Like you can't link something in the HMI to a UDT unless the UDT is a type. And if you're going to go down the hassle of having UDTs as types, you might as well do everything and create those dependency links through everything. The takeaway from this, one of the things to take away from this rather, is that you can see the difference between a typed object and a non-typed object with this little black dog ear on the corner. If that's there, then it belongs to a library. It belongs to your project library. If it's not there, then it doesn't. And you can go ahead and terminate the connection and all that sort of stuff and de-link it from the library. But I recommend that you don't. You'll get yourself in a mess when you start doing that stuff. If you come to the properties, you can check your version number in this square brackets here. So analog asset manager version 0.0.1. And in the next lesson, we're going to look at versioning and what sort of things happen when you start changing versions and modifying data.